Admiral Jack Morrison's fist slammed into the holotable, scattering the blue projections of Earth's destroyed defense fleet like dying fireflies. Around him, in the cramped underground war room of humanity's last military command center, 12 grim faces watched another catastrophic defeat unfold. 3 minutes, he growled. It took them 3 minutes to tear apart our most advanced ships like they were made of paper. The Admiral's weathered face, scared from 20 years of warfare against the Kraxan Empire, reflected the harsh red emergency lighting that had become all too common in these bunkers. General Zhang's metallic voice cut through the tense silence. Their quantum targeting systems predicted every move our AI made. The Kraxan aren't just winning anymore. They're not even trying. They're playing asterisk with us. Morrison watched the replay again, focusing on the moment the Kraxan's energy weapons carved through Earth's newest defensive screens like they didn't exist. The quantum-locked vessels of the alien empire simply appeared where they needed to be, their position and timing perfect, their attacks precise. The pride of Earth's fleet, reduced to expanding clouds of plasma and frozen debris. Perhaps, began Dr. Elena Rodriguez, her cybernetic eyes whirring as they adjusted to the dim light, if we diverted more resources to improving our quantum shielding. We don't have more resources. Colonel Webb's voice cracked with exhaustion. Luna Base fell last week. Mars is dark. The orbital shipyards are gone. Face it, humanity threw everything we had at them, and it wasn't enough. Morrison barely heard the ensuing argument. His mind wandered to the last conversation he'd had with his grandfather, just before the old man passed away 5 years ago. James Morrison had served on one of the last wet Navy vessels, the U.S. Gerald R. Ford, before it was decommissioned and preserved as a museum piece. He used to tell young Jack stories about carrier operations, about the raw power of jets screaming off the deck, about the art of warfare before AI and quantum computers took over. "Sir," Lieutenant Sarah Hayes' voice snapped him back to the present. "The Kraxan fleet is moving again. Their trajectory suggests they're positioning for a final assault on Earth. Best estimate gives us 72 hours. Morrison straightened, his eyes fixed on a point far beyond the holographic displays. "Lieutenant, access the Lunar Museum's database. Show me the Ford." "The museum, sir." "The U.S. Gerald R. Ford. Last Nimitz-class supercarrier. I want to see her specs." The room fell silent as a new hologram flickered to life. A massive vessel, over 1,000 feet long, its deck bristling with aircraft. Though 4 centuries old, the preservation teams had maintained her perfectly, a testament to humanity's naval heritage. "Sir," General Zhang began carefully, with respect, "that's a museum piece. It's primitive." Morrison's laugh was sharp. "That's exactly what the Kraxan think too. Tell me, Dr. Rodriguez, what powers their targeting systems?" The scientist blinked. "Quantum entanglement processors. They predict our movements by calculating probability waves across multiple." "And their shields, their weapons, all energy-based. Plasma fields, quantum-locked particle beams." Morrison's grin grew wider. "And what happens when you pit energy weapons against good old-fashioned steel and electromagnetic systems?" Understanding dawned on Colonel Webb's face first. The Ford systems are purely electromagnetic. No quantum components, no AI cores, just raw power and human ingenuity. "More than that," Morrison said, expanding the hologram. "She's been perfectly preserved. Those hangars could still launch aircraft. Those radar systems still spin, and the Kraxan." He paused, letting the implications sink in. "The Kraxan have never faced anything like her. Their quantum predictors can't calculate what they don't understand." "You can't be serious," John protested. "It's suicide." "No." Morrison's voice carried the weight of certainty. "It's humanity's last card to play. And if I'm right, it's the one card the Kraxan will never see coming." He looked around the room, meeting each pair of eyes in turn. "Ladies and gentlemen, I suggest you brush up on your 21st century naval warfare. We've got 72 hours to resurrect a supercarrier. The war room erupted in chaos, but Morrison barely heard it. His mind was already racing through the possibilities. Sometimes, he thought, the best way forward was to take a step back, and humanity was about to take one hell of a step back. The Lunar Museum's preservation dome loomed before them, its crystalline surface reflecting Earth's battered visage. Admiral Morrison led his hastily assembled team through the airlock, their footsteps echoing in the pressurized chamber. Behind him, Dr. Marcus Way, the museum's chief curator, nervously adjusted his glasses. "This is insanity," Way muttered, his breath fogging his faceplate. "The Ford hasn't moved in 4 centuries. She's an artifact, not a warship." "That's where you're wrong, Doctor." Morrison's flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the carrier's massive hull. "She was built to fight. That's not something you forget." The preservation field flickered off at Way's command, revealing the U.S. Gerald R. Ford in all her glory. Nearly 3 football fields long, her flight deck stretched into the darkness like a steel runway to the stars. Despite her age, her hull gleamed as if she'd been commissioned yesterday. The preservation field kept her in perfect condition, Way admitted, checking his tablet. "But Admiral, even if the hull is intact, the internal systems..." A voice cut through their comms. "Sir, you need to see this." It was Lieutenant Commander Rachel Torres, their engineering specialist, calling from the carrier's Combat Information Center. 5 minutes later, Morrison stood in the CIC, watching in amazement as ancient screens flickered to life. Torres' hands danced across keyboards that had last seen use when fusion power was still theoretical. "It's beautiful," she breathed, her cybernetic maintenance interface struggling to connect with the purely electronic systems. No quantum circuits, no AI cores, just pure, raw engineering. The Kraxan won't be able to hack this because there's nothing to hack. It's all hardwired. Morrison noticed movement in his peripheral vision. Through the CIC's windows, he could see teams of engineers and technicians swarming the flight deck. Sparks flew as they began the delicate work of modernizing what they could without compromising the ship's essential nature. "Status report," he barked into the comm. Colonel Webb's voice crackled back. "Flight deck integrity at 94%. The museum boys did one hell of a job preserving her. We're retrofitting the catapults with modern materials, but keeping the electromagnetic launch system original. These things were over-engineered to hell and back." A sudden tremor ran through the ship. Emergency lights flashed. "Kraxan patrol," Way shouted, checking his sensors. 2 quantum destroyers, passing within 100 kilometers. Morrison held his breath. The preservation dome would hide them from casual scans, but if the Kraxan decided to take a closer look... "They're not stopping," Way reported, confusion in his voice. They're ignoring us completely." Torres laughed. "Of course they are. To their quantum sensors, this ship might as well be a chunk of space rock. No energy emissions they recognize, no AI signatures, nothing but metal and circuits. We're invisible because we're primitive." Morrison allowed himself a grim smile. "Their arrogance will be their downfall. How long until we can move her?" Torres consulted her displays. "Main reactors are intact. Electromagnetic propulsion systems are responding. 24 hours for basic mobility, maybe 48 to get her combat ready." "Sir," Webb cut in, "we've got another problem. We can restore the ship, but we need pilots. Real pilots, not AI jockeys, the kind who know how to fly by the seat of their pants." Morrison nodded. "Already on it. I've got a call in to Colonel Rodriguez. She's been running a secret training program out in the asteroid belt, teaching colonial defenders how to fly without quantum assistance. They call her Wildcard for a reason." He turned to face his team, seeing the same mix of fear and determination in their eyes that he felt in his gut. "The Kraxan think they've evolved beyond us, that their quantum technology makes them gods. But they've forgotten something fundamental about humanity." "What's that, sir?" Way asked. Morrison ran his hand along a nearby console, feeling the solid, reassuring strength of American steel beneath his fingers. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways, and we're about to give them one hell of a history lesson. Above them, through the dome's transparent sections, Earth hung like a bruised jewel in the void. They had 48 hours to resurrect a 400-year-old carrier and turn it into humanity's last hope. The clock was ticking. Colonel Emma Wildcard Rodriguez stood in the Ford's cavernous hangar bay, watching as her ragtag group of pilots circled an F-35 Lightning II that looked fresh off the 21st century assembly line. The preservation field had kept the aircraft in pristine condition, its stealth coating still maintaining that distinctive radar-absorbent black. "This," she announced, patting the fighter's fuselage, "is what real flying feels like. No quantum assistance, no AI support, just you, the stick, and pure instinct." One of her pilots, Lieutenant Maya Chen, raised her hand. "Ma'am, with respect, these birds are ancient." The Kraxan, Rodriguez interrupted, "have never faced a pilot who can think faster than their quantum predictions. Watch this." She nodded to Chief Mechanic O'Malley, who activated a holographic simulation in the center of the hangar. The display showed a Kraxan quantum destroyer, its probability field shimming as it tracked targets. Alongside it, an F-35's flight path appeared, seemingly erratic. "Their targeting systems work by calculating every possible move an eye would make," Rodriguez explained. "But human instinct, the way your gut tells you to bank when something feels wrong, the way you can pull off a maneuver that defies computer logic just because you feel it might work, they can't predict that." Admiral Morrison watched from the hangar's observation deck as Rodriguez put her pilots through their paces in the simulator. Each of them had been handpicked from the colonies, places where atmospheric flying was still necessary, where the old skills had never died out. "Impressive," a voice said behind him. He turned to see Lieutenant Commander Torres. "But will it be enough?" Before Morrison could answer, alarms blared throughout the ship. "Proximity alert." Wei's voice crackled over the comm. "Kraxan scout ship on an intercept course." Morrison's heart raced. They weren't ready. The Ford systems were still being calibrated. The pilots hadn't even made their first real flight. "Launch me." Rodriguez's voice cut through the chaos. She was already running toward the F-35, her flight suit gleaming under the hangar lights. "Colonel, that's suicide," Morrison protested. "One pilot against. One pilot they can't predict." She shot back, climbing into the cockpit. "Trust me, sir. This is what you brought me for." Morrison hesitated for a split second, then nodded to O'Malley. "Clear the deck. Launch procedures." The massive hangar doors groaned open, exposing the launch bay to space. The preservation field adapted, maintaining atmosphere while creating a corridor of vacuum for launch. Rodriguez's F-35, retrofitted with space-worthy seals, but otherwise unchanged, moved into position. "Remember," Torres called over the radio, "their quantum fields can't track what they don't understand. Use that." "Oh, I plan to," Rodriguez replied, her voice steady. "Wildcard, ready for launch." The electromagnetic catapult hummed to life, a sound that hadn't been heard on the moon in centuries. The F-35's engines roared, a thunder from humanity's past about to echo through space. "Launch." The fighter shot forward, breaking through the preservation field into the void. On their screens, they watched as the Kraxan scout detected her approach. Its quantum field flickered, trying to calculate her trajectory. Rodriguez flew like her call sign suggested, wild, unpredictable, pulling maneuvers that no eye would ever attempt. The Kraxan's energy weapons fired repeatedly, always striking where she should have been, where logic said she would be. But she wasn't there. The F-35 rolled, pitched, and yawed in patterns that seemed chaotic, but were pure human intuition. She closed the distance before the Kraxan ship could adjust its predictions. "Let's see how they handle some old-school ordnance," Rodriguez growled. The F-35's weapon bay opened, releasing a single missile, technology so old it was new again. The Kraxan scout shields, calibrated for energy weapons, didn't even register the kinetic projectile until it was too late. The explosion lit up lunar orbit like a new star. As Rodriguez returned to the Ford, cheers erupted throughout the ship. Morrison smiled, watching his pilots rush to congratulate their new instructor. They'd just proved his theory correct. Sometimes the best weapons were the ones your enemy had forgotten how to fear. The newly christened UES Vengeance sliced through space, her ancient hull vibrating with power. On the bridge, Admiral Morrison studied the tactical display showing their target. A Kraxan supply convoy, escorted by 3 quantum destroyers. Wildcard Squadron, report status. He ordered into the comm. All birds ready for launch, sir, Rodriguez responded from her F-35's cockpit. My pilots are itching to show these quantum-locked bastards what real warfare looks like. In the months since Rodriguez's spectacular defeat of the scout ship, they'd trained relentlessly. Each pilot had logged hundreds of simulator hours, learning to fly with pure instinct against enemies that relied on predictability. Now it was time to prove whether their training would hold in real combat. Multiple quantum signatures detected, Lieutenant Hayes announced from her tactical station. Kraxan escorts are maintaining standard patrol formation. They haven't spotted us yet. Morrison nodded grimly. Their arrogance is our advantage. Launch the first wave. Deep in the Vengeance's hull, electromagnetic catapults hummed to life. One by one, F-35 shot into space, their formations deliberately loose and unpredictable. No eye-driven pattern recognition could make sense of their approach. Enemy vessels detecting our fighters, Hayes reported. Their quantum fields are fluctuating. Sir, I think they're confused. Through the tactical feed, Morrison watched as the Kraxan destroyers activated their energy shields. The alien vessels, sleek and deadly with their probability-bending drive systems, began calculating firing solutions based on standard attack patterns. But Rodriguez and her pilots weren't flying standard patterns. Wildcard Squadron, weapons free, Morrison commanded. Show them what the past feels like. The first missile volley caught the Kraxan completely off guard. Their shields, designed to disperse energy weapons, might as well have been tissue paper against solid projectiles. The lead destroyer's hull crumpled under the impact, its quantum field collapsing as conventional explosives tore through its reinforced plating. By the stars, Y breathed, watching from his station. Their technology. It's made them forget the basics of physics. The remaining destroyers tried to adjust, their targeting computers struggling to predict the seemingly random movements of the human fighters. Energy beams lanced out, always firing where an eye would logically move, and always missing as the pilots relied on gut instinct and centuries-old combat maneuvers. Squadron 2, you're cleared hot, Rodriguez called out, just like we practiced. A second wave of fighters emerged from the Vengeance's launch bays, carrying a nasty surprise. Pods of simple metal chaff, another primitive weapon that played havoc with the Kraxan's sophisticated sensors. The space around the convoy erupted in a cloud of metallic particles. To the Kraxan's quantum sensors, it was like trying to see through a thunderstorm with equipment designed to track planets. They're breaking formation, Hayes reported, excitement creeping into her voice. Their targeting systems are completely blind. Morrison allowed himself a tight smile. Now, Colonel, take their supply ships. Rodriguez led the attack herself, her F-35 screaming through the chaff cloud. The supply ships, their escorts in disarray, were defenseless against the combined attack of 2 fighter squadrons using combat techniques centuries older than their quantum technology. Multiple detonations confirmed, Hayes announced. Supply ships are, sir, they're all destroyed. Remaining escort vessels are jumping out of the system. The bridge erupted in cheers, but Morrison raised his hand for silence. Damage report. 3 fighters with minor damage from debris impacts, Rodriguez reported. No casualties. Sir, we just defeated a Kraxan battle group without losing a single pilot. Morrison stood from his command chair, addressing the bridge crew. This isn't just a victory. This is proof. The Kraxan think they've evolved beyond us, that their quantum technology makes them superior. But today we prove that humanity's greatest strength isn't in abandoning our past, it's in remembering it. He turned to Hayes. Send word to Earth Command. Tell them Operation Resurrection was a success. And tell them. He paused, allowing himself a full smile for the first time in years. Tell them to start looking for more carriers. The war isn't over. It's just beginning. In the void of space, the Vengeance's radar dish continued its slow rotation, an ancient sentinel scanning for enemies who'd forgotten how to fear the past. Multiple quantum signatures detected. Hayes' voice cut through the tense atmosphere of the Vengeance's bridge. Largest Kraxan battle group we've ever encountered. Sir, they're being led by Supreme Voidmaster Kethrix himself. Morrison's jaw tightened. Kethrix was legendary among the Kraxan, and commander who had never lost a battle. His quantum-integrated neural network supposedly allowed him to process combat data faster than any other being in the galaxy. Show me, he ordered. The tactical display lit up with dozens of enemy signatures. At their center, Kethrix's flagship, a massive quantum dreadnought that seemed to exist in multiple places at once, its probability field so strong it distorted space itself. They're hunting us specifically, Torres reported from engineering. Those energy signatures, they've modified their weapons to try penetrating our hull. Rodriguez's voice crackled over the comm. Let me launch the squadrons. We can. Negative, Colonel. Morrison interrupted. They're ready for our fighters this time. Look at their formation. The Kraxan ships had arranged themselves in a complex three-dimensional grid, their overlapping quantum fields creating a web of energy that would shred any fighter squadron that approached. Kethrix had studied their tactics. Sir, Way called out, his eyes fixed on his atmospheric sensors. There's an ion storm approaching. Class 3 severity. Morrison's eyes narrowed. Helm, plot a course for that storm. Full power to the electromagnetic shields. Admiral, Hayes protested. Our shields weren't designed for. Neither were theirs. Morrison cut her off. The difference is, ours don't rely on quantum probability. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways. The Vengeance's ancient engines roared to life, driving them toward the roiling mass of charged particles. Behind them, Kethrix's fleet gave pursuit, their quantum fields flickering as they calculated the carrier's projected course. They're launching quantum torpedoes, Hayes reported. Impact in 15 seconds. Hold course, Morrison ordered, his knuckles white on the command chair's armrests. Way, what's the storm's intensity? Increasing rapidly. It's interfering with my quantum sensors. Wait. Way's eyes widened. Sir, the storm, it's not just ions. There's a debris field hidden inside it. Asteroids, old ship fragments. Morrison allowed himself a grim smile. Natural camouflage. Helm, take us in. Full power to conventional radar. The Vengeance plunged into the storm. Lightning-like discharges crackled across her hull, but her electromagnetic shields, technology considered obsolete centuries ago, held firm. Behind them, the quantum torpedoes lost lock and detonated harmlessly. Enemy fleet is still pursuing, Hayes reported. Their quantum fields are destabilizing in the storm, but they're pressing the attack. Kethrix is adapting somehow. Of course he is, Morrison muttered, because he's fighting the way we expect him to. He keyed the ship-wide comm. All hands, this is the Admiral. Prepare for emergency maneuvers. The old kind. The Vengeance suddenly killed all power, drifting dead in space. To the Kraxan's quantum sensors, she vanished completely, just another piece of debris in the storm. Kethrix's fleet swept past them, their sophisticated targeting systems unable to distinguish the powered-down carrier from the surrounding wreckage. As the last enemy ship passed their position, Morrison gave the order. All batteries, fire. The Vengeance's primitive gun batteries opened up, firing salvos of magnetically accelerated shells. in the confined space of the debris field, against ships whose quantum fields were already compromised by the storm. The effect was devastating. 3 Kraxan ships died in the first volley, their hulls shattered by weapons they'd dismissed as obsolete. The rest, including Kethrix's flagship, scattered in confusion as their quantum targeting systems failed to locate the source of the attack through the storm's interference. "Enemy fleet is pulling back," Hayes reported, unable to keep the triumph from her voice. They're retreating." Morrison watched as the mighty Kraxan battle group fled, leaving their dead behind. "Send a message to Earth Command," he ordered quietly. "Tell them Supreme Voidmaster Kethrix just learned what every human knows. Sometimes the best ambush is the one that's older than your enemy's technology." The Vengeance emerged from the storm alone, victorious. A ghost from humanity's past, now the nightmare of humanity's enemies. The lunar shipyards, once silent and abandoned, now hummed with activity. Through the observation window of his temporary command center, Morrison watched as workers swarmed over the hull of another restored carrier, the UES Defiant, formerly the U.S. Nimitz. 6 carriers restored and counting, Colonel Webb reported, sliding a datapad across the table. The Chinese found 2 of their old Type 003 carriers preserved in the Martian Historical Center. The British are refitting the Queen Elizabeth. Even the Indians are reactivating the Vikrant. Morrison nodded, studying the readiness reports. Each success against the Kraxan had sparked a global renaissance in retrograde warfare, as the media called it. Humanity was reaching back through centuries of military history, finding weapons their enemies had never learned to fear. "Sir," Lieutenant Hayes burst into the room. "You need to see this. The Kraxan just tried to hit the Brazilian shipyards." The tactical display sprang to life, showing the battle that had just concluded. Morrison watched in satisfaction as a squadron of restored F-14 Tomcats, their very existence an insult to modern warfare, tore through Kraxan formations, while blasting AC/DCs thunderstruck on all frequencies. "The music disrupts their quantum harmonics," Torres explained, entering with a stack of analysis reports. "Their targeting systems try to incorporate the sound waves into their calculations. It drives their computers crazy." "Who came up with that tactic?" Webb asked. "Some kid from the Australian restoration team," Torres grinned. "Said if it worked for his great-great-grandfather's hot rod, it might work in space." Morrison was about to respond when Rodriguez stormed in, her flight suit stained with engine grease. "Admiral, we've got it working." She activated a hologram showing a modified F-35. "We've been studying the Kraxan's quantum detection systems. Turns out they completely ignore anything using old-style jet propulsion. They filter it out as background noise. So we've modified our fighters to switch between modern and ancient drive systems mid-combat. They become invisible every time they kick in the jet engines," Torres added. "It's like punching a quantum computer in its digital face." Morrison was about to congratulate them when alarms blared throughout the facility. Wei's voice came over the comm. "Multiple Kraxan signatures detected. They're attacking in atmosphere." The tactical display shifted, showing a Kraxan fleet descending toward Earth's surface. Their quantum fields flickered erratically. They were struggling to maintain cohesion in the planet's atmosphere. "They're desperate," Morrison realized, "trying to fight us where our old technology should be weakest. Route all squadrons to intercept." What followed was a battle that would be studied for centuries. Modern Kraxan warships found themselves dogfighting with restored Hornets and Eagles, their quantum computers overwhelmed by combat maneuvers perfected over centuries of atmospheric warfare. Every attempt to predict human tactics failed as pilots switched randomly between modern and ancient technology. "Sierra Squadron, hit them with the Springfield Special," Rodriguez called over the tactical net. Morrison watched in amazement as a group of fighters executed a maneuver that hadn't been seen since World War II, updated for 3-dimensional space combat. The Kraxan ships, trying to calculate probable flight paths, walked right into the trap. "Enemy fleet is withdrawing," Hayes reported hours later. Confirmed kills. 27 ships. Our losses, 12 fighters, all pilots recovered. She paused, checking another reading. Sir, their quantum signatures are degrading. Their computers, they're starting to fail completely. Torres looked up from her analysis station. The random elements were introducing. The old tech, the music, the obsolete tactics, they're creating a cascading failure in their prediction matrices. They physically can't process warfare that doesn't follow quantum logic. Morrison stood at the window, watching Earth's combined carrier fleet return from battle, contrails mixing with the aurora of dissipating quantum fields. Send word to all commands, he ordered quietly. Tell them the Kraxen's greatest weakness isn't their technology. It's their inability to understand that not everything in war can be predicted. He smiled as another squadron of fighters roared past, their ancient engines thundering a promise to the universe. Humanity hadn't survived for millennia by forgetting its past, but by carrying it forward into the future. Operation Lazarus is a go, Morrison announced to the assembled commanders aboard the Vengeance. The holographic display showed their most ambitious plan yet. Dozens of carrier hulls, some genuine, others cleverly crafted decoys, scattered across 3 sectors of space. The Kraxen's quantum sensors are already degrading from constant exposure to our primitive warfare. Rodriguez explained, highlighting key points in the battle plan. Now we're going to push them over the edge. Torres stepped forward, her hands dancing through the holographic display. We've modified the nuclear reactors in our active carriers to emit specific radiation patterns. When the Kraxen detect these signatures, their quantum computers will go haywire trying to process what looks like dozens of impossible energy readings. And that's where the Ghost Fleet comes in, Webb added, pulling up images of the decoy ships they'd constructed. These hulls are largely empty, but they're broadcasting the same signatures. To the Kraxen, they'll look like an armada of supercarriers appearing and disappearing at random. Morrison watched his officers' faces, seeing the mixture of excitement and apprehension. The Kraxen's entire strategic doctrine is based on perfect information, knowing exactly where we are and what we'll do. We're about to give them so much false information that their entire command structure will collapse. The plan began with a simple transmission, a fake message about a new human superweapon, deliberately leaked to Kraxen intelligence. As their sensors detected the first strange energy signatures from the modified carriers, their quantum computers began devoting massive resources to analyzing the threat. First wave of ghost ships deployed, Hayes reported from her tactical station. Kraxen fleet elements are already diverting to investigate. On the main viewer, Morrison watched as enemy ships scattered across the sector, chasing phantom readings. Each time they thought they'd cornered a carrier, they'd find nothing but empty space, while real attacks struck their undefended supply lines. Brilliant bastards, Way muttered, studying the sensor readings. The Kraxen computers are trying to calculate probability fields for ships that don't exist. It's creating a feedback loop in their quantum networks. Rodriguez's voice crackled over the comm from her fighter. Sierra Squadron engaging target Delta. Their formations are completely broken. They can't tell our real fighters from sensor ghosts anymore. The battle unfolded across 3 dimensions of space, but the real war was happening in the Kraxen's quantum computers. Their mighty artificial intelligences, designed to process perfect information, were drowning in a sea of contradictions and impossibilities. Major quantum surge detected, Hayes suddenly shouted. Massive power signature from the Kraxen command nexus. Morrison leaned forward in his chair. They're trying to brute force a solution. Divert all Ghost Fleet emissions to that sector. Let's give them more data than they can handle. The effect was devastating. As the Kraxen computers tried to process the flood of conflicting information, their quantum fields began to collapse. Ships lost coordination, their sophisticated targeting systems reduced to useless crystal arrays. "Sir," Torres called out, "we're detecting widespread failures in their quantum network. The entire Kraxen battle net is crashing." Through the tactical display, Morrison watched as the mighty Kraxan fleet, the terror of the galaxy, fell into disarray. Ships fired at sensor ghosts, while real carriers struck from unexpected vectors. Fighters slipped through their defensive screens, their primitive jet engines rendering them invisible to overwhelmed quantum sensors. "Message from Earth Command," Hayes announced, her voice tight with emotion. Other sectors reporting similar results. The Kraxan, their entire strategic command structure is collapsing. Morrison stood at the forward viewport, watching as explosions bloomed silently in space, the death throes of ships that had forgotten how to fight without perfect information. "Send word to all commands," he ordered quietly. "Operation Lazarus is a success. The Ghost Fleet has done its job." He turned to face his crew, seeing the pride in their eyes. "The Kraxan thought they could predict every move we'd make. Instead, we've taught them the oldest lesson in warfare. Sometimes the deadliest weapon is the enemy's own certainty." As the Ghost Fleet continued its deadly dance through space, the real carriers gathered for what everyone knew would be the final battle. The Kraxan's quantum advantage was broken. Now it was time to show them what humanity's obsolete weapons could really do. The combined carrier fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kraxan home system. 12 restored supercarriers, led by the Vengeance, moved into attack formation. Through the bridge viewport, Morrison could see their fighter escorts, a mix of F-35s, F/A-18s, and restored aircraft from every nation on Earth, their hulls gleaming in the light of unfamiliar stars. "Kraxan home defense grid detected," Hayes reported, her voice steady despite the tension. "Their quantum barrier is active, but it's unstable. Operation Lazarus damaged their systems more than we thought." "All carriers, report status," Morrison commanded. One by one, the fleet checked in. The Defiant, Intrepid, Dragon's Fury, Vikrant, Charles de Gaulle, and others, each one a museum piece transformed into humanity's salvation. Their ancient steel hulls had brought humanity to the brink of victory. "Enemy fleet approaching," we announced. They've completely disabled their quantum targeting systems. They're going to fight us conventionally." Rodriguez's laugh crackled over the comm. "Too little, too late. They don't have centuries of experience to fall back on. All squadrons, form up. Remember your training. Fight like your great-great-grandparents did." The space between the fleets erupted in chaos. Kraxan ships, their sophisticated technology now more hindrance than help, found themselves facing humans fighting with centuries of martial knowledge. Fighters executed maneuvers from every era of aerial combat, switching between modern and ancient technology with practiced ease. "Sierra Squadron, break and attack," Rodriguez called out, just like Midway. Morrison watched as fighters dove through the Kraxan formation in a perfect split-S maneuver, their primitive weapons tearing through hulls that had never needed protection against kinetic impacts. The Kraxan ships, trying to adapt to conventional warfare, found themselves outsmarted by tactics older than their civilization. "They're falling back to their defense platforms," Torres reported. "Final line of defense." Morrison keyed the fleet-wide comm. "All carriers, execute Operation Legacy. Show them what these old ships can do." The 12 carriers moved in perfect formation, their electromagnetic catapults launching wave after wave of fighters. The Kraxan defense grid, designed to stop energy weapons and quantum attacks, had no answer for the sheer volume of conventional ordnance being hurled at it. "Their barrier is failing," Hayes shouted. "Multiple breaches detected." On the tactical display, Morrison watched as centuries of human military heritage broke through the most advanced defensive system in the galaxy. F-35s flew alongside restored Tomcats, their combined firepower overwhelming the Kraxan's last defenses. "Message from their high command," Way reported, surprise in his voice. They're surrendering, sir." The bridge fell silent. After years of desperate warfare, after reaching back through centuries of history to find their salvation, humanity had won. Morrison stood from his command chair, looking at each member of his crew. "Send word to Earth. Tell them." He paused, emotion threatening to break through his professional demeanor. "Tell them humanity's heritage of steel has prevailed." Hours later, as the formal surrender was being arranged, Morrison stood on the Vengeance's flight deck, watching fighters return home. Rodriguez landed her F-35 and climbed out, removing her helmet. "You know what really won this war, sir?" she asked, joining him at the deck's edge. Morrison raised an eyebrow. "Not just the old technology or the tactics," she continued. "It was remembering who we are. The Kraxan tried to make warfare pure mathematics, all quantum predictions and perfect information. They forgot that war, like humanity itself, is chaos and courage and determination." Morrison nodded, running his hand along the carrier's deck. Steel that had waited 4 centuries to prove its worth. "Sometimes the old ways are the best ways," he said quietly. "Not because they're old, but because they're part of who we are." Above them, Earth's fighters continued their victory patrols, their contrails painting the stars with proof of humanity's greatest truth. Their strength lay not in forgetting their past, but in carrying it proudly into the future. The ancient thunder of jet engines echoed through space one last time. Not a reminder of what humanity had been, but a declaration of what they would always be. Survivors, warriors, innovators who knew that true strength meant remembering where you came from, even as you reached for the stars. The end.